Hello and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. This episode, we're back on the Eastern Front, and this time we are taking a look at one of the games found in Against the Odds magazine's annual 4 Roads to Moscow, which, as it mentions here, and you can see the title article of this issue, Why Did Barbarossa Fail? There are 4 games in this magazine, in this annual, looking at the Barbarossa campaign. Now, I did a mega review of all 4 games. If you'd like to see it, it's posted on Board Game Geek under 4 Roads to Moscow. What I'm going to highlight on this video is my favorite of the 4. That is Hitler Turns East, designed by Ted Racier, and again published by Against the Odds, or published in Against the Odds magazine. So, going to take a look at this, and because of course, as I've mentioned before to you guys, for me, the most interesting part of the Eastern Front campaign is 41-42, and this one just covers literally Barbarossa through the counterattacks that the Soviets launched, which of course then got bogged down when the Rasputista set in again in the springtime. The time without roads, as the phrase says. That's when the scenario ends. And all of them pretty much end around the same time period too. I might do a video for one of the other ones in this group called Slaughterhouse, which is kind of more of like an area impulse game, like Storm over Arnhem or Turning Point Stalingrad and kind of thing. We'll see. I haven't played that one for a while, and that one's okay, so maybe. But I did decide to highlight this one because I think this one is interesting. There's a lot of good things I like about this design, but there are also a few things that are a little iffy. So let's just jump right in as always. Now, to start this video, I'm actually going to begin with the action phase, which is a little bit into a turn, and then I'll show you at the end the beginning of the next turn, which goes over things like the reinforcements, command points, which are very important in this game. That's how you generate the chits, which are drawn for each turn. So, as you can see here, I'm actually, just to zoom in, I'm actually on turn 3, the last fair weather turn there, August of 1941, before light mud sets in. And to be honest, that is one of the drawbacks of this game, is the weather is set. There's no way around that. As you can see, then we get into some frost, and then we get into snow, before, once again, we get into mud. Okay. Now, in order to win this game, the Germans have got to capture victory point cities. Now, victory point cities basically are cities in red. So let's zoom in here just to show you what I mean by that. So if we zoom in here on Kiev, see how Kiev is completely capitalized? They're all capital letters. Well, that's a major city. But notice it's black, which means Kiev is not, yes, I repeat, is not a victory point city in this game. A victory point city would actually be here, Kharkov. Again, see how it's all capitalized, and it is red. So the Germans win by grabbing all those cities, which of course there's quite a few in the south. There's a fair number in the center. But the interesting thing is in the center, they really don't start to pop up until you get around Rzhev, Orel, Tula, places like that. So, yeah, Minsk, Smolensk, they're good and they're important to the game for supply considerations, but they're not victory point areas. So basically, on each turn, you get a certain amount of command points, you buy your markers. You buy markers that you will assign one to each front that you have, depending on which side you are. So, for example, over here with the Germans, I have Army Group North, Army Group Center, Army Group South, and Army Group A down here. Okay, and every time I draw a chit, I will assign it to one of these army groups. I'll do the same thing with the Soviets on the other side, which have the Northwest, the West, the Southwest, and the South fronts. Okay, now the command chits that you end up getting depend on how many command points you have to purchase with. And again, I'll kind of go over with that toward the end, but I want to give you an idea how the game flows as far as the chit pool goes Because again, some people love chit pull, some people hate chit pull, so that's really the heart of this game. So that's why I'm going to focus on that first. Okay, so again, it is August of 41. As you can see here in the south, I really haven't moved much. We're still kind of really holding on to the border here with Hungary and Romania. Okay, in the Army Group A area, I should say. Now, Army Group South, of course, it's been tough sledding because, again, if you know anything about the Barbarossa campaign, Stalin really thought that the Germans were going to strike into the Ukraine. He was concerned about that, which, again, is interesting because that's what Hitler was emphasizing himself. And the bulk of the Russian forces were placed there. And I just now, and again, it's August, and I just now managed to bust this open here, so I'll be ready to do a nice advance here with the Germans. But again, it's August. So, but again, Kiev didn't fall until the end of September, so, you know, historically, I guess I'm on track. Not that I want to be historically on track, because, of course, then I'm not going to win. All right, in the middle here, as you can see, I've done a pretty good job. I probably should have lunged at Smolensk last time instead of lunging over here at, what city is this? This is Vitebsk. So I lunged at Vitebsk, the so-called land bridge in between the two rivers here is what I did. And then as you can see, Army Group North, I've kind of left Army Group North on its own too. So clearly for this particular play, I'm going for the victory point win. You can also win the game as the Germans through an automatic victory, which basically requires you to capture either Kiev, Leningrad, and Moscow, or Kiev and Moscow, and Leningrad has to be tracing supply basically over Lake Ladoga, or Ladoga, I guess, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Or you can also win by Leningrad, Rostov, and either Sevastopol or Maikop. So there's a couple different ways you can automatically win the game as the Germans, but the other way, of course, is to have 12 victory points at the end of any given turn. And then, of course, that will basically will give you the victory points. I should say you can go that route as well. Okay, so and that's actually at the end of the last turn. So I misspoke there. That's not an automatic one. That's at the end of the last turn. So I'm going with that. Okay. All right. So that's where we're at in the big picture. So now the Germans have the initiative during turns whenever the weather is fair. So what I've done is I've chosen my first marker. The rest of the markers went into the cup. And we'll talk about each one as we go along here. So the first one I'm pulling there is the assault order. Now I can give this order to any one of the army groups that does not have an order yet. So it can be north, center, south, or A. Okay? And on the rule book, there are, whoops, wrong way. There are charts telling you how many movement points that you get with each one. So like assault here, my infantry can have 4 movement points, and my armor mechanized guys have 6 movement points to work with here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch my assault here. I think I'm going to try and really make a big effort to get to the Dnieper River here by the end of August. That's going to be hard to do, though. But again, it'll show some of the rules, so we'll go ahead and do that. So let's start with that. So I put that in the south box here. So we'll zoom in on the south, because that's going to be the focus of operations here. Now, there are boundary lines in between the army groups. They're a little hard to see at times, but if you kind of start from here and trace, and then along the boundary lines, they also have words along them further on the map, so it makes it easier to see. But you can only activate units within those army group boundaries, so only the ones within the boundaries of Army Group South I can use right now. If you want to transfer units from one army group to another, then the only way you can do that is you may cross an army group boundary, but only if that army group is activated first. So for example, if I wanted to, say do, you know, like the Germans did, send a bunch of Panzer Corps south to help capture Kiev, I would have to activate Army Group South, as I've already done, and then do center. I couldn't do it the other way around. I couldn't activate Army Group Center first and drive those Panzers down there. You can only send it into one that's already been activated, so keep that in mind. Supply is also based on army groups too. You can only trace supply through the army group boundaries. You can't cross over to another boundary to do that. okay, as well with that. All right. Speaking of supply, since I just mentioned it, if you look at the city right here, Rovno, in front of Kleist's Panzer Group here, notice it has both the Red Star and the German Cross. That indicates that this city can be used as tracing supply for both sides. Now, some cities only have Soviet stars, especially the further you get into Mother Russia. So you have to be careful with that as a Germans, because you have to basically, you need 4 hexes in good weather between your units and any supply city. So like Rovno, or like further on here, once I manage to get a hold of Zitomir, okay, and Venista, then I can go ahead and also use that, and then you basically trace it as a chain backwards from there. Okay, so the supply can be a little tricky in the game. Even trickier is the zone of control rules, which we'll get to here in a minute. Now, if you remember here when we just zoomed in, Kleist counter, there's 2 leader counters in the game. There's Kleist and Guderian. They have counters that allow them to basically do whatever they think is best. So for example, right now, again, I assigned the assault order to Army Group South, and now if I want to, and I do want to, I'm going to roll a die and see if Kleist is going to basically do his own thing, as it were. Now, if I roll a 1 through 3, he will. Then I can change his orders to any one of the other orders that I want. And the orders that are available for the Germans are the Blitz Mobile Defense, Assault Withdrawal, and either Hold and Advance to Contact, which is basically, you know, what most of those orders sound like. Are pretty straightforward. You know, Assault, you can attack. Withdrawal, you can pull your troops back. Hold, Advance to Contact, stay put, or go ahead and just, you know, make contact with the enemy without an attack. So let's see, first of all, if Kleist is going to be able to do his own thing. Unfortunately, no. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that I rolled a 2, just to show you what's going on here. So now Kleist can do anything he wants, which, of course, now I'm going to let him have orders for the Blitzkrieg Mobile Assault, which is actually going to give him 8 movement points. Now, that only counts for units that are actually stacked with him whenever he begins this turn. Okay. Now, the good thing about the Blitz is that you're allowed 1 mobile assault for the Panzer Corps when you use that order. Now, only for Panzer Corps. Armies do not get that. The Germans have armies, and they have Panzer Corps. That's it for the game. Okay. And supply is also important as well, too. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and move these guys down here and see if I can capture Venista here on the run. Okay, so terrain, it's clear, it's fair weather, so 1, 2, 3, so I can go into here, and of course now I've captured this, and now I have my chain of supply working its way back. Okay, now zones of control do impact supply unless you have a friendly unit in the hex to negate. So again, here I can trace supply through this city because we have the 6th Army, the ill-fated 6th Army there. Units have zones of control that affect supply and retreat. However, the only units in the game that have zones of control that affect movement are the German armies. So you can basically, as the Germans, if I wanted to, I could keep running Kleist here, and I could run all the way down to here to Cherkasy if I wanted, and just bypass these guys if I had the units, which I don't, unfortunately, to make, you know, like a gigantic pocket here, because the Soviet units' zone of control doesn't affect movement. Again, that's a little weird. It's a little wonky from what, you know, we usually see in war games, but I think it actually does a good job of, you know, portraying the difference in terms of quality and ability and stuff with the forces that were available. It's interesting, what I've seen in Thunder in the East is kind of a similar thing where infantry zones of control don't affect mobile units, which is interesting concept, and I am looking forward to playing that. But I'll be honest with you, I'm working my way through it. I'm kind of watching some videos because there's a lot to digest there, and I just think videos might help. So it'll be a little while before I'm able to show off my own version of Thunder in the East. Okay. All right, so we've gone 1, 2, 3, and now I can mobile assault into this hex here. It is eligible to do so. Now, you can only mobile assault once a turn. Costs you 1 extra movement point to do it, and then of course you can keep going if you still have movement points. Okay, So this is going to be, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 5 of my 8 I'm using up here, and we're attacking on the fly. Okay, and I've got 12. A strength of 12. I've got 3 Panzer Corps, 4 times 3. So 12 to 2 is 6 to 1, but it is a major city, so that will shift it 1 to the left based on the terrain effects. So basically now we're looking at 5 to 1, but a very important rule here to remember is when you have one of the leaders, you get to add 1 to the die roll. So 5 to 1, and bam! High is good in this game. I rolled a 6. So that is going to be the end of that Soviet unit, and they will go into the dead pile where they may or may not be recycled. And I will move into here and also capture this, and I have 3 movement points left. Now if I wanted to, I could swing the Panzer Corps back into here and drop them down and basically have them cut off these 2 Soviet units here. So actually I think, as odd as that may seem, I think I am going to do that with them and basically give them the ability to do that, even though the Soviets will be able to come after me later. I do want to do it to illustrate, again, something interesting with the rules. So let me go ahead and do that. So 1, 2 is what I have left. And again, remember, I don't have to pay any extra movement points because zone of control does not exist. And I can still trace supply over here to Rovno, so that works out well. Okay, so Kleist is done moving with his guys there. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the 6th Army and move them into here. We'll leave these guys here. The what army is that? 17th Army for that. And now basically we are finished. Now with blitz orders, which Kleist has, he has his own blitz orders here. Panzer Corps then can also attack during the combat segment, which comes after movement. So I can, and that's part of the reason I was looking to trace supply here, I can go ahead, and still use them. But first thing I'm going to do here is basically try to block this out, so I don't have to worry about 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, which I can do it this way, but it just makes things easier and neater. Now I can put a Stuka, which I have 3 Stukas available to use, so I'll go ahead and do that as well here. So maybe I should have left 6th Army where they were, huh? That's okay, because I can use Kleist to attack here against these guys. Now for purposes of combat, you can attack over an army group boundary, but only 1 hex. That's it. Alright, so these guys now technically are cut off because with the zones of control here, you can't trace through here, these guys can't trace through here. Now technically I can trace into here, but then these guys would end here. So when that happens, you basically then have to figure out the shortest distance you would have to a friendly supply source, which since I captured all these back here with the Germans, that basically cuts that off, and then you subtract 1 combat factor. So that's going to reduce these guys down to 1. You can never go less than 1. So we're actually going to have 8 to 1 odds here. So I'm going to save the Stuka. I'm going to use it with a different combat. So 8 to 1, which would be 7 to 1 with the force there, 1 to the left. So that's a 5. So it's defender eliminated. Now, when a force is eliminated that is surrounded, that is cut off from supply, and has no way to go, you roll a die. And the die roll is used to determine if that unit is permanently removed from the game. Okay? So, the way that's done is you roll a die, and if the die roll is greater than the combat factor, which is the printed combat factor, that's how I read the rules anyway. I don't think it's the combat factor that is reduced, like what just happened here with this. It's a 3, I would need a 4 or better, so these guys are eliminated, and we can advance after combat, but they go into the pool. Now, this particular Soviet unit has an E on it, which means when it comes back at its reduced side of a 2. Alright, now over here, again, we're going to have the same problem. These guys are going to be reduced to 1, so that's going to be a 6-to-1 assault. So I probably should have saved that stupid for somewhere else on the front line there. 6-to-1 is a 1. Defender retreats, but they don't have any place to retreat because they would have to lose a step for every hex that they have to go through. But Soviet units only have 1 step. So again, they are surrounded by the enemy. And see, surrounded and unable to retreat. Now that I'm looking at this, you know what? I might be wrong about this. Okay, units that are completely surrounded are eliminated. Huh. Now see, this is a little vague, is if it's completely surrounded by units or by zones of control. Huh. See, I've been reading that as zones of control. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but that's the way I've been playing it, so that's the way we're going to do it here. This time I rolled a 3, which is higher than the 2. So that will be the end of those guys for the game. I'm going to leave 6th Army where they are, though. So that's the end of them. Now again, over here, Kleist's units, and now of course we can trace easily enough. We'll have a chance to attack there, 12-2. Now of course these guys can trace supply. Actually they can trace it down to here. Sorry about that. I pointed the wrong direction. But again, I mean, you're looking at 6-to-1 odds with a +1. Thanks to Kleist, which is a 5. So those guys are wiped out. Now, they are not completely surrounded because this hex is free of any zone of control. So they would go into the eliminated units that could come back. But see the N on this? When you see the N marker on any Soviet units, they are completely, utterly, and wholly eliminated from the game no matter what. So that's that. So I could advance 1 hex, and I think I will here, just to use zones of control to try and tie down some of these folks. And I can easily still trace supply back if I need to for the time being. Okay, so all of my guys have done orders. This was kind of dumb to waste that Stuka there, so I should have thought more about that. Now I guess one could argue that I could pull it back out rather than assigning it to there, but that's kind of a personal choice. I have a tendency to kind of, suck it up and deal with my own stupidity, so, like, just not a very good job of coordinating logistics, shall we say. Alright, so, I'm all done now with the Germans, Army Group South. Now we're on to the next chip pull. Let's see what we're going to get out of the bin here. Okay, so we've got the, let me come back out and make it easier. There. We got the hold advance to contact. Okay, so obviously I don't want to use that for Army Group Center. Okay, Army Group North, really all I've done is I pared them down to 2 armies, which may not have been the smartest thing to do. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll put that there for them. Now again, they can move forward, so I'll bring them up to 3, mostly to kind of, just cover the flank of Army Group Center right now. Which again, this may not have been the best idea in the world, but sometimes I just goof around with different ideas just to see if they're going to work or not from a strategy standpoint. And if it doesn't work, hey, just set it back up and try again. No big deal. So that was kind of a quick, easy one. Sometimes they are easy. Sometimes they do take a while, like what happened with Army Group South there, because you got a lot going on. Now in the game, and this is another thing I like about the game, there are mandatory counterattacks that the Soviets must do. Now some counters, if you look here, you can see this is turns 1 through 4. These counters are in the mix for the first 4 turns. So when that happens, as the Soviet player, you have to roll a die. In this case I rolled a 2, and you check the chart for mandatory attacks. So this says the West Front. So basically what happens now is everybody who's in the West Front, which basically is the group that is opposing Army Group Center, any units that are available need to move towards the closest German unit, and basically we're going to have one giant counterattack all along the line. Okay. Now, for stacking purposes, you can only have 1 army in a hex. All Soviet units are armies. German infantry units are armies. German panzers are not. Hence why Kleist had 3 corps stacked with him there. So all these Soviet units here, we're going to move them. So move these guys into the swamp. We'll move these guys closer. They get 4 movement points for this, by the way. 2, 3, 4. And then here we're going to end up stacking them up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. Okay. So then once you've done that, you basically take every single Soviet unit that is adjacent to a German unit, total all those combat factors up, total all the defense factors of the German units there, and then come up with an odds ratio. Quite frankly, most of the time, it's usually 1 to 2 odds. Because if you look at this here, we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we're going to have 12, but right here, Guderian's 3 Panzer Corps are already 12, and that doesn't even count all these guys who are here. So clearly you can see it's going to be a 1 to 2 odds attack. Now, there's 2 results that can happen here. I rolled a 5. So on the 1 to 2 odds, you can either have the attacker loses 1, so the Soviets lose 1 army out of the mix, or both lose a step. So for the Soviets here, I think what I'm going to do is I'll eliminate this unit here in the swamp. I'd rather keep this unit, these guys, completely in line to protect Moscow, because Moscow's worth a lot of victory points. And then the Germans have to lose a step somewhere along the line here, too. Now, I can take it out of the Panzer Corps. Actually, I think I have to take it out of the Panzer Corps, yes, because the only German army that's nearby, infantry army, the 9th Army, doesn't touch. Alright, so in that case, we'll take it out of 39th Panzer Corps here. Okay, and we'll flip that. So that's the counterattack. And again, I mean, it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but it is a cool touch because, you know, a lot of games don't have that element where you're forced to do that. So I do like that about this game. Excuse me. Okay. Alright, so I did pull, there we go, an assault marker. So we're going to go ahead and use the assault. Now I'm going to assign the assault, let's see, should I assign it to Army Group A first or Army Group Center? Now this is part of the decision you have to make with the chit pool is where you're going to use your chits and what order. And that's part of the game here as it unfolds. Well, let's see. See, the thing here is with Army Group Center is the Soviets really have thrown a lot of troops in the way. So trying to get in there and trying to blast my way into all these spaces, that's going to be tough. But I do have 2 Stukas left, and I can use 2 Stukas with Army Group Center. So I might want to do that. Or I could put it with Army Group A and wait. And see, maybe the Soviets have to another mandatory counterattack, which they could lose an army, but of course I could lose a step in the meantime too. I don't want this video to run too long, so what I think I may end up doing here, yeah, because we're already kind of pushing 30 minutes on this. Let me go ahead and do Army Group Center, and again, you know, then I'll have done, you know, some of the counterattacks, some of the German army groups, which that has been random. That's just what I had pulled from there. And then I'll show you quickly how the command points basically work from turn to turn. I'm not showing you how I got my command points for this turn, I guess. So not going to quite work out the way I wanted it to, but again, you know, I'm just trying to show you how the game plays. So again, you can make a decision. Is this something that you would like to pick up? Alright, so let's go ahead with Army Group Center. So first order of business is to see, does Guderian go off on his own? I know that's a stupid question. That's a rhetorical question. Of course Guderian's going to do what he wants. But in the game, you actually do have to roll the die. So let's see. Okay, Guderian rolled a 2. So, shocker! Guderian is going to do his own thing. Alright, so now the question is, what's the best way to maximize him? Here. So we're focusing on Army Group Center here, which of course does kind of trail back here towards where the 40th Panzer Corps, which I should have, but I was making the emphasis on Moscow, kind of like I did with the Barbarossa campaign, which I just finished a little while ago. I was just basically doing the OKH plan, the German general's plan, if you will, one could argue. Lunging towards Moscow, everything towards Moscow. You know, that's why Army Group South looks the way it does, and then Army Group North is kind of, you know, doing a flanking thing. As opposed to what Hitler was originally envisioning, which was the border battles, which again depends on how you define where the border frontier battles ends. and then of course peeling off a lot of elements from Army Group Center, both north and south, to capture, Leningrad, Ukraine, and then, and only then, come after Moscow. So, for me, one of the more interesting things that I've always thought about over the years is, basically where and when do you stop as the Germans? And can you afford to do it? Do you lose too much of your advantage, your momentum? Given the fact that the Soviets really did not, at least in my opinion, they really did not begin to master the combined arms operations until late 1942 with the counterattacks, Mars, Uranus, and stuff, although Mars was an epic failure. But Saturn, I guess, was the other one. If I'm remembering correctly, my brain's a little fuzzy today. The up and down weather here is kind of messing with my allergies and stuff. But those ones, you could argue, they really were starting to get better at it. And then by 1943, they really had turned the corner in terms of combined arms and stuff. So really the Germans would have had that advantage throughout, in my opinion at least through the early autumn of 1942. So again, when to stop. But right now, we're not stopping. We're rolling. The train kept rolling all night long. Okay, so now part of the problem here is now maybe what I should have done was give a hold to these guys and spent the extra point that I had for Army Group Center to do the blitzing thing. But even then, well, it would have helped with the Panzer Corps, because then all the Panzer Corps here could have blitzed into these hexes and tried to rip this wide open. So that would have been, that would have been better. Oh well, what are you going to do? Alright. Boy, what I could do is, I could go ahead and take Guderian, attack here, and if I manage to clear this completely, I could go over here and grab Rzhev for my first victory point city. The only problem is, if everybody else doesn't bust their way through, that's looking a little risky and thin for supply. Yeah. But the problem is, I know there's mud coming next turn. And see, that's one of the reasons I don't like the predetermined weather chart is I know it's coming. There is no element of gamble to it. There is no element of, will the weather hold off? Not in this game. So, okay. Well, I do have Stukas. So what I could do is I could use Guderian here, move him into here, and then move these guys up. Attack with them first, try to destroy these units, which then would get supply to Guderian's units, and I could send some this way with Stuka support, and try to bash those guys too. That's an interesting idea. Okay, let's try that. Alright, so I'm going to attack here. So it's going to be 12 to 2, 6 to 1, plus 1 modifier for Guderian. So basically this is a open and shut case, because on the 6 to 1 chart, the only chance is not being eliminated is a 1, but since I have Guderian, I get that increase, so no worries there. Okay, so I do bash this Soviet army. It is smashed. So now I can take Guderian's 3 Corps, which includes my beloved 24th Panzer Corps from Vitebsk, and I can go ahead and keep moving. That was only 2 movement points, and I have 8 movement points altogether. Of course, then again, if I wanted to, I could sit in the middle of this and attack all 3 of these, but these guys are in a forest. I don't like that idea. Alright, let's do this instead. Let's go ahead and we'll move 1 space into here, and we'll leave behind 1 Panzer Corps, and I'll advance in here, and I will grab Rzhev for my first victory point city. And then we'll wait and see how I'm going to handle. Let me come back out here. Whoops, out, not in. Yeesh. Still having trouble with that after all this time. Alright, so now I can move the rest of everybody else here, because everybody else is under assault orders. Okay, so let's move the army into there. We'll move these 2 Panzer Corps into here, along with this one. And again, remember, I can move right past, right past these Soviet units because they don't have a zone of control that affects movement. So if the hex is empty, I can roll. Train kept it rolling. And as you can see, one of the drawbacks to this game, which I'm having a very difficult time with right now, is the half-inch counters. To quote the dude, well, that's a bummer, man. Alright, so 57th Panzer Corps roll into here. Now these forests, these doggone forests. So 2, 4, I can roll these guys into here, attack across the river if I want. 1, 2, 3, 4, send those guys that way. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. See, I can only get that far still. If I go this way, 1, 3, 5. Okay, we'll go this way because they have 6 movement points. So 1, 3, 5, 6 will allow them to plunge into there. Okay, and now I'm going to have to launch these attacks from back to front because otherwise, well, no, that's not true. I've got all these units lined up. Guderian would be able to trace to Vitebsk, and then we'd be able to trace 1, 2, 3, 4 back to Minsk, and then eventually all the way back to the Greater German Reich. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm just trying to figure out how I want to do this. So I could have Kluge's army, 4th Army, with Stuka support. These guys, with or without Stuka support. Then these guys could go here. These guys could go bash here. And then Guderian could bash there. Now the road to Moscow is open. Okay, let's do that. Alright, so Guderian I have 2 Panzer Corps, that's 8. This is up against a minor city. So, or a town. I guess it's not really a city. Those are towns with the ones that don't have all capital letters. So there's no effect on combat. So that's 4-1, plus 1 to the die roll. Ouch. I only got a 2. Ow. Exchange. Yay. Okay. So, good news is Soviet units eliminated. Yay. Bad news is, one of my Panzer Corps takes a step loss. Well, you can bet it's not going to be the 24th Panzer Corps. Ain't happening. So, now I could advance after combat if I wanted, but since the Soviets have not gotten their orders yet for the West, I don't want to do that. So we'll let that go. Alright, now I'll use one of my Stukas, because I can use up to 2 Stukas in Army Group Center. I'll use it here with the 46th Panzer Corps, so that will also be a 4-1 assault. That's a 6. That's much better. And the enemy is eliminated. Now again, they're not surrounded. And I will advance after combat here to try and see if I can get some of these guys completely surrounded down here. We shall see. Okay. And you know what? I'm not going to be able to completely surround them. That's not going to work. No, actually it is not. Alright. Alright. So here's 4-1. With, I think that's 9th Army. That's another 6. Excellent. Excellent, yes. So it is 9th Army. I'll launch them into Vitebsk. So that's another Soviet unit, or I'll have them exit Vitebsk, I should say. Let's see. So we've got 2 Panzer Corps here. That's going to be 10 to 2. Smolensk is just a town. Yeah, it's not considered a city. That's right. You heard that right. So, let's see. So that will be 5-1 odds. Okay, that's fine. We'll just go ahead with that. Ouch. 5-1 is a 1. Oh, it's another exchange. That wasn't okay. I should have used the Stuka, huh? Alright. I'll just double check on one rule here. But, yeah. No good. Alright, so unfortunately I'm going to have to take another Panzer Corps and flip it. Yikes. That's not good because, of course, I don't have too many replacement points for the Panzers. I don't have too many replacement points as the Germans at all, which, again, those of you who know a lot about the Eastern Front, this should not exactly become as a, sudden news bulletin to you. Alright, so now I've got these guys left here. So I'll use that other Stuka, and we'll just see if we can blast those guys into oblivion, which we should be able to do so. No sweat. Yeah, I know, I'm kind of hitting an ant with a sledgehammer here. That's 6-1, that's the end of those guys. So they've been wiped out as well. Alright. But again, not surrounded, so not so good. But the good news is, as you can see here by my final position, although there's a lot of menace on my flank up here, the road to Moscow is now wide open. You know, there ain't nothing between me and Moscow but wide open spaces, because here is Guderian and there's Moscow, which I'm sure somewhere Guderian's like, yes, that's what I wanted all along. So that's all taken care of there, and that's the end of that one. All right. Now, as far as reinforcements and stuff goes, just to kind of wrap up this video here, I'll show you the other aspects of things. Most of it's pretty straightforward for the Germans. You know, you have to basically, your reinforcements gets placed in a city in Greater Germany, and replacements, you have to be in supply to get the replacements. If you don't use the replacements, they're lost. So in some ways it is good to take a hit on the Panzer Corps, so that way you're not, you know, just wasting it and it's just, you know, no good anymore, so to speak. The Soviets are a little different, okay? And one of the things that are different is when you look at how many units they get per turn, they always get a minimum number of replacements to come back. But they also get some added for victory point cities that are captured by the Germans. So for example, the next turn here, turn 4. Okay, let me zoom in here. See the 2 and the 4? So the 2 is the minimum number of replacement armies they will always get. Soviets will always get that. But if the Germans capture a victory point city, which I did, I captured Rzhev, then I'm going to add another eliminated unit to the pile up to the maximum of 4. Now let's say the Germans captured 3 victory point cities this turn, then I would put 2 here, which would take me up to 4, and then the next one will fill the next box. And if this box is filled, then you fill the next, etc., 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 on and on from there. Okay, as far as that goes. So that's how that works for the Soviets. It's a little confusing at first, but it's not too bad once you get the hang of it. Okay. Now the last thing I want to show you here, whoops, is the command points. And what I'm going to do is show you basically what happened last time, and you know how we determine that, and also my little system for doing so. I know there's a lot of chits and stuff, and I think there's enough chits to do it with. Actually, I think there is, now that I'm looking at this harder, even with what goes in the cup. But I just use the dice because I like it as a visual. It's an easy way for me to remember, oh, okay, you know, what I did and stuff. You know, what's coming up next turn. Because basically, when you roll, like I rolled last turn, and I'll just show you what I rolled and how that worked out here in a minute. When you roll, you're really rolling for the next turn. So you really kind of have to do plan ahead here with this game. Okay. So basically what happened was, for the Germans, I ended up getting a roll of 4. So hang on, let me grab a die here. So I ended up getting a roll of 4, which gave me 10 command points, and the Soviets ended up with a final roll of 2. So once you have those numbers figured out, then you get to spend those command points, and you spend them down here. Here, let's go back out. There we are, and then we'll zoom back in as much as we can. Here we go. Okay. So now you can see here the cost for each order. So like the Germans, I had 10 points. So I can spend, whoops, sorry, wrong column, any combination that adds up to 10 here. Okay, but I have to have enough orders to cover all 4 army groups. So I can't, like, you know, spend, well, I could buy 2 of these, which is 8, and then 2 of these hold advance to contacts, because that would be 9, 10, and then I would have 4 altogether. 1, 2, 3, 4. So maybe I should have done that actually. Nah. The problem with this is that, you know, it's like you do want to advance along the whole front, but you can't always do that. It doesn't always work out so well. So, but that's what I could have done. What I did instead was I purchased 3 assaults, which of course is 9, and then 1 hold advance to contact for my 10th one. Okay. Now for the Soviets, you spend a lot of time, quite frankly, with the Soviets doing these 2. Okay. Although the Zhukov marker comes into play here on the 3rd turn, and if you draw it, you can have Zhukov launch an assault without any cost, and give an assault order rather without any cost and stuff. So that's what you do. You roll, you find out how many points you have, you buy them, and then, like I said, what I do, what I have done, just because I like the visual and being able to see quickly by glancing over, is then I just use 6-sided dice, and then I just use the side. So like assault costs 3, so I bought 3 assaults, so there's 3 threes, and I bought 1 hold advance to contact, which cost 1. Now for the Soviets, I bought 2 withdrawals, so that way I can pull back if I feel a need to kind of, regroup, set up a better defensive barrier based on terrain, and then of course I also have 2 hold advance to contacts. Okay, the orders do restrict which direction you can move, how many movement points you get. That's all based on the orders. Okay, but again, you're rolling for them for the next turn, so keep that in mind with what you've done and what you put together for this current turn. Okay. Now again, I do like this game because it is a good Barbarossa game. It is interesting. It has different elements to it that you don't find in some other war games. Again, some of it's, you have to take a little time to wrap your head around, but in the end, I think it works. I do like it. I do like the chit pull. The biggest drawback to me in the game, again, is the fixed weather chart. I mean, I guess, you could argue that historically, well, that's what happened, but the other side of the coin is war games are supposed to be all about the what if. Well, maybe not all about, but for a lot of people like myself, it is all about the what if. So again, if you want more detail on the game as far as a review goes, jog on over to Board Game Geek, so to speak, and check it out. I have a mega review that I reviewed all 4 of the games in the set. There's Hitler Turns East, Slaughterhouse, Code Word Barbarossa, which is an interesting game because it's like preparing for the Barbarossa campaign. It's kind of a build-up sort of thing. And then Strike the Bear, which, that easily has to be one of the worst games that I have ever played. It's just, there were some interesting ideas that were in the game, but it's kind of like that problem, that gap between theory and practice. The theory was interesting, but the practice, whew, yikes, the reality, implementing it, ouch, not so good. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a good idea of the overplay. I know we didn't do a whole lot with the Soviets, but let's face it, during the Barbarossa campaign, as the Soviets, you're basically trying to slow down and blunt the Germans as much as you can and look for those opportunities. You're kind of like a boxer that, in the early rounds, the other guy's got the upper hand, and you just keep your gloves up and boom, 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 but then you look, when you get a chance, boom, boom, jab, you jab back and see how much damage that you can do. Anyway, so that's Hitler Turns East from the 4 Roads to Moscow Against the Odds annual from, I believe, 2010 is when that was printed. Okay, now, next time around, not sure. Because I am kind of thinking right now about the idea of playing Russia Besieged again soon to try the so-called Hitler plan. Launch the invasion, do the frontier battles, and then swing the bulk of forces from Army Group Center, North and South, to focus on Leningrad and focus on the Ukraine. But again, the question is, where do you stop when it comes to the Ukraine? I don't know if it's realistic to go all the way to Rostov, but I guess that's a separate topic, I guess, for a different video. So I am thinking about that as far as that goes, but I'm also looking at some of my smaller magazine-based games, or some of my games that are systems that, like the Turning the Table system, which there was 4 games of that altogether, the biggest of which was von Manstein's Backhand Blow, which was done by GMT Games back in 2003, 2004, one of those years. That was part of the Schwerpunkt series. I tracked down the other 3 in the series, so I might show off one of those. But I'm also thinking about Drive on Moscow, which is basically Operation Typhoon. And I also have Stalin Moves West, which of course is the hypothetical, what if the Russians had decided to attack in 1941 before the Germans did, which they did have a plan for. So, but anyway. But I do like this game. That's definitely a keeper for me. You know, something to pull out and try. That's a little different. But again, you kind of have to pay careful attention to the rules, because otherwise you will miss things. And I will have to check on that surrounded bit, if it means physically by units or by zones of control. So zones of control affect retreat and that sort of thing. So I'm going to have to also jog over to Board Game Geek and post that as part of a question thread. All right, so again, not sure when I'll be back. Oh, and I haven't forgot about the contest. I've just been kind of really busy. As you guys can see, this is my first video in 2 weeks. But I did have 6 folks send me emails, so I am going to just basically assign each of those folks a number and, you know, roll the die, and we'll see what fate decides, and then I'll get in touch with the winner via email. So, all right. So this has been Tim Korchnor from Bare Bones Wargaming, saying, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time, probably from somewhere on the Eastern Front. I'm just not sure exactly where. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where, but more than likely somewhere from the Eastern Front, because I'm kind of into playing East Front games right now. So, again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.